Welcome to Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. On this podcast, we journey through the devastating experience of the death of a child. Grief is seldom discussed openly in our culture, and the death of a child makes people feel even more uncomfortable. We approach the topic openly and honestly, speaking to people who have lost loved ones and experts who help care for them. Whether you are a parent experiencing loss or someone who wants to support another going through this tragedy, this podcast strives to offer hope and help.
Welcome to episode 130 of Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. I'm Marcy Larson, Andy's mom. Today's guest, Debra, is really special to me. She reached out to me a few weeks ago, and this was only 6 months after her son Aven had died. Their story was very unique, though, because Aven had actually almost died as an infant. He had a common respiratory infection that got worse and worse. He was placed on a ventilator, and things got worse and worse. And they prayed and prayed, and they got their miracle. Aven survived, and not only did he survive, he thrived. So sometimes when you're a bereaved parent like me, I have a hard time with those stories because these people got their miracle and I didn't. I am bothered by people who write about their teenagers getting in car accidents and walking away and being fine, and the fact that God saved them. And I think to myself, God saved them. Why didn't God save Andy? Why didn't God give us the miracle? So Debra's story, I think, is really important for us to listen to because she did get the miracle the first time. And then 6 years later, she didn't. She's not a different person than she was 6 years ago. She didn't pray any differently than she did 6 years ago. But the outcome ended up being far, far different. So I do think it's good for those of us who have lost children to listen to someone who has had both extremes happen to them and how they go on after that miracle doesn't come. So I know you will really get so much from listening to Debra and Aven's story. As a little reminder, I don't know how many people have signed up to get my emails every week, but if you haven't, go to my webpage, andysmom.com, and sign up to get the weekly emails. So if you get the weekly emails, the write-up will be there along with 3 pictures that each guest sends, and the link to directly go to listen to the episode from there. So I think it's really nice to be able to see the pictures of these kids so you kind of know what they look like and a little bit about their family, even as you listen. So I just urge you to go there and sign up. In addition, I mentioned a couple of weeks ago now that we are starting a fundraising campaign to try to raise some funds to help cover the cost of the podcast. I've only received about 3 donations so far, so honestly, that has been a little disappointing. But as a reminder, everything is tax deductible and you will receive a receipt for that. So any way you can help support our production costs, it would be really, really appreciated. The easiest way to donate is to text Andy's mom, all one word, to the number 53555 on your cell phone. But you can also go to the website easily as well. Also, if you want to be a guest on the Always Andy's Mom podcast, you can write to me at marcy@andysmom.com. I just love hearing from people. Even if you don't want to be on and you just want to share your story, I always love to hear stories from other moms and dads and about their amazing children. So now just enjoy listening to Debra, Aven's mom. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on the Always Andy's Mom podcast today. I am really excited to get to hear about your sweet son, Aven. So why don't you just go ahead and start off by talking about him?
Well, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Listen to a lot of stories from other parents, so just kind of excited to get to talk about our little boy.
Yeah, I just to pause for a second, I do love that when you first wrote the email to me, you talked about how you listen at various areas in your house, and your husband will catch you listening to me in the shower. So I I think it's kind of funny now that you get to share your story. So we're not in the shower today. We're just here in our own homes having a nice little chat.
Yes,
So
I have listened to, so our son just passed away 6 months ago, so it's still pretty new.
really fresh. Yeah.
When I first started, kind of seeking out books and things to listen to, the podcast just came up right away, and I kind of dived head in. And I think the first week I probably listened to 8 or 10 of your guests, and it was just really healing. And anytime I was in the car or in the shower, and you were kind of always there with me, and just hearing other people's stories and how they have continued to live after the death of their kids has just been, it's been what I needed. So
Well, and you just don't feel so alone, because that is the overwhelming feeling, I think. And I feel like what I felt in those early days and weeks and months is just feeling so alone. And for me, there wasn't a podcast to listen to. So for me, it was going to my support group every week. Like, I felt a little bit better on Thursday nights. So I'm glad to be able to offer somebody like you something that you don't just get an hour and a half once a week, that you can get it on your own, little bits at a time. So
100%.
good. Well, again, we better get started now and talk about Aven, because there's quite a lot to tell, actually.
Yes. So Aven is our third son. We had twins that were born in 2012, twin boys. And then shortly after, just a year and a half later, we had Aven born. He was born at 27 weeks gestation. So he was a tiny little peanut. He weighed just over 2 pounds, 5 ounces. He needed a resuscitation at birth. A pretty traumatic, in the scheme of things, delivery.
Mm-hmm. Scary. Yeah. Were your twins early too, or were they not?
They were. So our twins were 29 weekers. So they spent 50 days
okay.
in the NICU.
So you were used to this a little bit.
We did. It was different. Mm-hmm. When the twins were born, we only had the two of them. So I could spend every second at the hospital. But when Aven was born, now I had a tiny little guy in the hospital an hour away, and then I had twins at home. So it was much different.
Yeah. Well, and more unexpected too. I feel like when you are pregnant with twins, there's a part of you that thinks we could be spending some time in the NICU. This could be a long journey for us. But I'm sure when you got pregnant again and had this time a singleton, you thought, well, now this one's going to be normal. Now we'll be able to go all the way through, and it will be just easy this time.
100%. Mm-hmm. You took the words right out. 100%. And his NICU stay was, it had its ups and downs, but he came home before his due date.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
He spent 87 days in the hospital. He did come home on oxygen, but it was easy. We carry around a little tank at home with us, and he stayed on oxygen at home for about a month, but we had our family together. We were so happy. We had our 3 boys within 2 years, which was chaos.
Yeah.
But it was perfect. It was everything we could dream of. Our family was complete and chaotic. Our house was never quiet.
Yeah.
But it was perfect. We had this great, wonderful life with our 3 boys. Mm-hmm. And we called them the 3 amigos. I mean, they did everything together. They were best of buddies, worst enemies. We always laughed that he thought he was a triplet.
Right. Right.
With there being such little bit of an age difference between them, he did whatever they did. He didn't slow down. He didn't do anything.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So he was at home, and he was developing just like he should. He was hitting all of his milestones. Everything was great. In the summer, when he was 6 months old, he caught rhinovirus.
Which is just the common cold. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's your common cold. But when you're premature and you have those little lungs, it's hard to fight those little colds off. So we wound back up at the same hospital that he was born in. And he progressively was needing more oxygen and more support. And they decided to put him on a ventilator. And when they went to put him on the ventilator, his lungs clamped down and his heart stopped. And he had to be resuscitated again, this time for over 40 minutes. And we stood at his bedside and we watched the doctors and nurses fight to keep him with us. And they eventually did get his heart started, but they didn't know how much brain damage had happened. I mean, he had been, without good oxygen supply for an extended period of time. And we were made very aware of the possibilities of what could come out of this. Yeah. They did the cooling procedure where they cooled his body and left him in a medically induced coma for several days to give his brain a chance to heal. And when we finally did get the imaging of his brain a couple of days later, he had very, very minimal damage, just a tiny little bit on the cerebellum and a tiny little bit on the peduncles. And everyone was basically in amazement. They said, we can't believe that for this extended period of time, he just has that little bit of damage. But they were also very realistic with us and said, he may never walk, he may never talk. His breathing, who knows what it's going to be. The cognitive impacts could be pretty significant. Mm-hmm. But we took him home 18 days later, and we had therapies lined up like crazy. He was receiving speech and OT and anything you could list. He was getting it all.
Right.
But we didn't care. We felt like we had this second chance.
Well, a miracle, really. I mean, that's what you felt like. I mean, 42 minutes down, wow. You don't think that you're coming back from that, right? I mean, that's not what you expect. And certainly when I was reading your email and 42 minutes down, I thought, oh, well, this was the beginning of now a hard life for this family, and a lot of therapies and a lot of interventions. But that's not what happened.
No, that's not what happened at all. Aven came home and he didn't stop. He was a living miracle. He started doing every single thing that the therapist would ask of him. He started walking just a little past a year. So typical range that, a normal child would.
I know. Average is 13 months. So that's average for not even a preemie.
I think he started at 15 months, which adjusted would
about 13 months. Mm-hmm.
He started talking and we laughed. We said once he started talking, he never stopped. He said, "I love you," all the time. He was just the sweetest, most caring little boy that you've ever met. He had the biggest heart of gold. He was friends with everyone. He had never met a stranger. He would go up to kids at the park and introduce himself, and he was just best buddies with everyone. So at age 4, right before kindergarten, all of the therapists said, "We can't see him anymore." And my background's in special ed. And I kept saying, "No, we have to keep him. Like, he's going to start kindergarten. I want to make sure everything's okay." And they kept saying, "No, he doesn't. You don't need us anymore. He's done.
Everything is really okay."
Everything was okay. And everything was actually better than okay. He was reading well above his grade level. His brothers would get upset sometimes because they would bring home homework and he could do the homework that was their assignments. So when we were virtual school, back when the pandemic was going on, I would just put him in front of the computer for the other kids' class because he wanted to learn. He wanted to do whatever they were doing. And he was just a sponge. His brain really healed in an absolutely amazing way. He was playing sports. He was on the swim team. He was this tiny little guy out there on the swim team. He played baseball. He played soccer. I mean, he was doing everything. He was living the best little life.
Trying to be the triplet, right? 100%. Trying to be the triplet.
And he loved telling people that his heart had stopped and that he got a second chance at life. He would tell everyone. And that was kind of his story. And he always wanted... I have so many videos of him saying, "When I grow up, I want to be a doctor because I want to help save other babies." And that was just who he was.
Yeah.
He just lived life to its fullest.
Yeah. So amazing. I mean, it's so funny. You just you got that miracle that so many of us didn't, but then the miracle didn't come.
Yep.
The next time.
It didn't. So we thought we had our perfect little life. We had our 3 boys.
Yep.
Aven had just started first grade this past summer.
Mm-hmm.
And everything was wonderful. We had gone down to the beach and we were hanging out with our family and friends one day. And he said, Mom, my head hurts. And we're like, well, we're at the beach. It's hot. You probably didn't drink enough water, typical thing.
Right. A little dehydrated. Mm-hmm.
We had plans to go out and get ice cream and go play putt-putt. He said, do you still want to go? Yeah, Mom, I'm okay. Okay. We didn't think anything of it.
Sure.
Went out, played putt-putt. He had a big ice cream cone with sprinkles. That was his thing. He loved sprinkles on his ice cream. And we came home and he went to bed and, we didn't really think anything else of it. And the next morning,
sure,
he walked into our room and one look at him, we knew something was really wrong. Yeah. He had a very high fever. He was just saying his head hurt so bad. And every time he would move, he was vomiting. So again, it was, the height of COVID, and it was just kind of in our area hitting kids. And so that's kind of what we assumed was, maybe he had COVID, and we took him to the urgent care because we weren't at home. We went to the urgent care down at the beach and they did a flu test and a COVID test. And they said, nope, he's negative. He probably has strep throat, and sent us home. And we went back to that beach house and we just kept saying, this is not strep throat. Like something is not right.
Yeah.
And so we decided to leave and to come straight back to UNC Hospital, UNC Chapel Hill, where he had been, multiple times before. And on the way to the hospital, I kept having to wake him up. He was just sound asleep and he would wake up and talk to me, but then he would go right back to sleep. And for our little 6.5-year-old boy who talks all the time, that wasn't normal.
Right.
So we got into the hospital and, no one really knew kind of what was going on. They were considering sending us home, maybe to admit us for observation. And as long as he was just sleeping, he was okay. And finally, someone said, maybe we should just rule out meningitis. And I'm thinking to myself, meningitis, no way, that can't be. But they attempted a spinal tap in the middle of the night, but they were not successful in getting that. They decided to admit us overnight. We were just kind of status quo. I mean, his fever was high. He would wake up and talk to us, and he would, get sick when he moved. That next afternoon, they were able to successfully complete a spinal tap and sent that off for, the studies to see what was going on. And that night, so 2 days after his symptoms started, things started going downhill pretty quickly. His respiratory rate and his heart rate, his blood pressure, he was hallucinating, just things weren't good. And so they admitted us into the intensive care unit where we had been so many times before, but it was the same doctors we knew and the same nurses that we knew. So there was a level of comfort.
Sure. Because this is the miracle kid, right?
It is 100%. And we were really optimistic, whatever we have, they were telling us, if it's meningitis, depending on what kind, you could be here for, a couple weeks. And we're like, okay, we got this. We've done this. This is our second home. We've done this before. So we were kind of prepared for that. And then that Tuesday, Tuesday around lunchtime, they came in and our worlds came crashing down. They said to us that he had an amoeba called Naegleria fowleri that we hadn't even heard of, didn't even know existed. And it's basically an amoeba that is found in all freshwater ponds, lakes, rivers, hot springs. But then it's also can be found in improperly chlorinated pools, hot tubs, splash pads, things like that. And they said that on the spinal tap, they had seen this and that things were not good. I did what every mom does, right? I went to the bathroom and I Googled it to.
I'm sure you did.
And the statistics came right up and the statistics said, 99% fatal. And that hit me.
We just don't have a good way to treat it at all.
There is no treatment at this time. I mean, there's a couple medications. So in the scheme of things, there's been just over 150 cases in the United States. And then there's been 5 survivors since they've been documenting this. And so we knew our chances were out against him, but we felt like, he's done this before. Like we
Right.
got this. So we can do this.
Right.
And at this time, he was still talking to us. He would still answer our questions. He knew who we were. He had that little, hallucinations the night before, but on Tuesday he was with us. So they had us bring in our twins, which was by far the hardest thing ever.
Right.
And we got to make some crafts with them, did handprints together. They asked Aven what his favorite song was, and he said the Power Ranger song. And so all of us, our twins and my husband and I, we sat there and sang the Power Ranger song together. We read the Invisible String together. One time when they were making us the handcrafts together, they asked Aven, they said, "What's your favorite color?" And he's always said blue. Blue's this color. And at that moment, he said rainbow. And we all kind of looked at each other. We're like, rainbow? But fast forward now, rainbow has brought us so much comfort, so we, we kind of think to ourselves, was he seeing some beautiful color in the sky? Rainbow. Was he giving us some comfort? I don't know. But we made these crafts together, and our minister happened to be there, and he said a prayer. And as he said the prayer, Aven rose his hands up and he did like this. And he knew we were there with him, and we gave him a big kiss and we told him we loved him, and they put him into a coma and drilled a little hole in his head to put a drain in, because they told us that with this amoeba, the pressure is going to build up and we need a drain to be able to relieve this pressure as it builds up, in hopes of giving the few medications that they have time to work.
Right.
So we told them we loved him, and, they put him in the coma and put the drain in, and then we waited.
Yeah.
So it was at that time that they started to ask us about exposure. It's summer in North Carolina. We swim all the time. We had been at the beach. We had swam in a pond. The kids are on swim team. And it was then that we first learned that this amoeba is on all freshwater. And our twins were swimming in the same water. Their family, friends, cousins were in the same water. But for whatever reason, he became infected with it. The following day, CDC gave us official diagnosis. And this is, in fact, what he had. And then we just sat at his bedside and we waited for our miracle.
Right.
People all over the country were praying for him. Our school community, our baseball community, everyone, they were holding prayer get-togethers. Everyone was, had on their social media pages number 6. We thought he was going to be miracle number 6. He was going to be the 6th survivor. And Thursday night was bad. The doctor that was there Thursday night was the same doctor that had been there when he had his cardiac arrest at 6 months. And we trusted him. And we knew, we know it was a blessing that he was the one there with us. But he said, we're going to high five every hour we make it tonight. His pressures were just getting higher and higher. And we did. We sat there at his bed that night and we high fived every single hour that we made it. And he came into the room about 4 a.m. and he said, the pressures are too high. Essentially, there's brain damage, irreversible brain damage, and there's nothing else we can do. And so my husband and I sat there and we climbed in bed with him and we held him and we told him how much we loved him, and we had to turn off the machines that were keeping him alive. So he passed away August 13th. It was 11 days after he had been swimming, just 5 days after his symptoms started. So our little perfect little boy,
just in a week.
We weren't expecting it. It was...
No, of course not. You wouldn't even think about it. Never. Yeah. We swim in lakes every day in the summertime, right? That's just what you do. It's not an unusual thing, so there's no reason to expect this. And especially I think with you having had and lived that miracle before, you just think that it's going to happen, right? You just think you've kind of done your hard thing, right?
100%.
And this is going to turn out. It's going to be okay. So just how hard that is when it's not, and that's not what ends up happening what everyone wanted to happen, right?
Yep. The whys are hard. Why my child that was born early, and why my child that had this cardiac arrest at 6 months, and why my child now, and wrapping our head around that has been really hard.
Yeah, for sure.
But when we look at how many lives that he touched, I mean, it's almost on a daily basis. I'll get a picture from one of his classmates who I didn't even know. I mean, first grade, and they've been doing virtual school for, most of kindergarten. I don't know a lot of the kids in his class.
Sure.
One of the moms almost daily will send me a picture that a kid has drawn, or one of the teachers at the school will send me a message and say, the class was talking about Aven today. And it's just been really amazing to see how many lives that he touched in his few little years.
Yeah. And I know in that email that you wrote me, you talked about how he had his first miracle, but then he also had another, right? So even though it wasn't the answer to prayer that you wanted, you still really define what happened as a miracle. So talk about that. Talk about how you do feel like the miracle came, just a different one than you wanted.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely didn't get the miracle we wanted. If we did,
right,
he would be here. But a lot of good has come out of the last 6 months. We've seen just a community that rallies behind a neighbor. But what we have also been able to do is we've been able to create a foundation to raise awareness, to raise funds, to work with education and training, research, trying to find new medications out there and a way to diagnose this amoeba earlier.
Mm-hmm.
That's key. And what we found out was there really is not a lot out there. There's a couple other small family foundations that have done amazing things, but there's just not a lot out there. And so literally a week after he passed, we created our foundation. It's called Amazing Avens Quest for Amoeba Awareness. And to date, we've raised over $230,000.
Wow.
It's pretty amazing. And it's all because of him. It's not because of me. It's not because of, anything I've done, but it just speaks volume to how many lives that he has touched and all the amazing things he did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm just thinking back to my own medical school training when you're learning about infectious disease and things like that. You just don't talk about the amoeba because there's just no way to treat it. There are a couple things that fall into that category, and amoeba are one of them. I mean, it's not a bacteria, it's not a virus, it's a totally different kind of thing, and we just don't have that technology to have effective things that can really kill those organisms. I mean, while saving a life, right? It's just so difficult.
Well, the thing that we've learned is, by the time your symptoms typically start anywhere from 1 to 9 days after exposure. And by the time that you start with symptoms, it has multiplied so much that even very early diagnosis within the hospital, but the only way to diagnose at this time is by seeing the amoeba in the spinal fluid. So you have to.
Yep. You have to actually see it there. Yeah.
And you have to have doctors that know the questions to ask. And that's what we found. A lot of the doctors at the hospital, they would say, we read about that one time in medical school.
Yeah, literally. That's it. That is it.
That's it. So we're really excited. We have some really great partnerships that are in the works. Some are talking to some researchers about some new possible medications and some new possible early diagnosis, but we're also working with local hospitals to train staff, to train ER doctors, to do some education on that side so that if a patient does come in, the questions to ask, if it's warm outside, to ask if they've traveled to somewhere else, even if it's the middle of winter, if they've traveled to a warm place and had freshwater exposure. But now it's also, there have been cases with splash pads and things like that, but just helping people know the questions to ask so that we can try to prevent this in the future.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and it's nice that you're able to kind of get funding too I've got friends who do research, and that's always difficult, right? It's difficult to get funding for things. You end up getting government funding or pharmaceutical company funding as a lot of the funding research. And for something rare like this, it's difficult to get either one.
Yes.
It's difficult to get it from the government because they feel like, well, we've got to spend our money where you get more bang for your buck a little bit, right? And you have more people that would be potentially affected. And then a pharmaceutical company too is like, not sure spending a lot of money on this, we will be able to make it up, because you have to be able to make it up on the opposite end to make the money on a medication, right? So that's why I think the private funding ends up being the way to go kind of early on like this, because there are certainly people that are interested that would love to do research on this, but it's just that if you can't have somebody be able to get you some money to do it,
100%.
Just doesn't happen.
That's kind of where we are. And, we're hoping to make a difference. We have some other pretty cool, exciting things that don't necessarily relate to the medical part, but it helps tell our fun story. We have a dear friend that volunteered to write a book about Aven, but it's not about the end. It's not about what happened. It's living life to its fullest. So it's a superhero theme, and we're super excited to just, be able to share this children's story, and for other kids, to see kind of what it's like to be a little boy out there loving life and living to its fullest.
Well, and I love that too. I mean, that's the kind of the coolest thing about Aven in a lot of ways was the way he lived. And I think the way he told people about how he was a little living miracle, right? My heart stopped for 42 minutes. I mean, that's a cool thing to be able to say. And I think he lived like his heart stopped for 42 minutes too. And you raised him as that kid who really got a second chance that a lot of kids don't.
Mm-hmm. He did.
Right? I mean, that's how he lived his life. He lived his life like it was a gift, because it was.
Yep. He never took a minute for granted. And, he had the biggest imagination. He loved to dress up. So, he still, even at 6, he still had doctor's appointments where he was followed by cardiology and pulmonology. And all of the doctors laughed because every time he would have an appointment, you never knew what costume he would wear. He would head to toe come dressed in some costume. But everyone knew him, and that was just his personality. The last couple months he was alive, his favorite movie was The Greatest Showman. And so he would dress up as the circus, I don't even know what you call him, but the guy in The Greatest Showman, and he would sing A Million Dreams, and he knew it
really
word. He made us listen to it every morning on the way to school. And it sits with me now. And I think, that was his life, was having all of these dreams and just making something of it,
It's funny you say that, because yesterday I saw a little kid who came in as the dressed up as the Flash. He was quite proud of himself in his Flash outfit, and I kept talking about how fast he was the whole visit. So 6-year-olds are just so amazingly fun anyway. So it was neat to hear kind of that side of him. I think that really silly, imaginative side.
Yes, and that's Aven definitely had that. I mean, sometimes he would pretend that he was one of Grandpa's cows, and he would make us talk to him like a cow. And sometimes he had a little owl costume he would dress up as, and he would only answer to us if we talked to him like an owl. But that was just his personality. He loved life.
I want you to tell the story about how his name came to be and what that kind of means to you now too, because that's a cool story.
Yeah. So when we had our kids, we wanted family names. And so when we first found out we were having twins, we had a girl name and a boy name. We never imagined we'd have 2 boys. Well, we got 2 boys and we named them after the grandpas. And, love their names, couldn't be happier. And then we find out we're pregnant again. We're like, oh, it's going to be a girl. We have all these girl names, right? No, it's another boy. My husband had a very close relationship with his grandmother, and he really wanted to use her name somehow in one of our children's names. And like, well, we aren't having another kid. We've had 3 kids early. That's it.
Yeah.
And so we kind of played with the letters in his grandmother's name, which was Neva. And we flipped them around and we created Aven. And we loved it. It meant something to us. We knew where it came from, but it wasn't blatantly apparent to everyone else that he was named after, a grandmother. But his name was Aven, Aven. And very shortly after he passed away, someone shared with me, they said, you can't spell heaven without Aven. And it stopped me in my tracks. And I'm like, you know what, you can't. And that's kind of been our thing now. We know without a shadow of a doubt that that's where he is. It's comforting to know that even in heaven, they go together hand in hand.
Yeah. You talked about, was it a bumper sticker or something that you did?
Yep. The town, some friends of ours created some bumper stickers that say heaven. And, anytime I drive out now, I see people all over town that have them on their back of their car. And just kind of a reminder, it is our Aven, but there's also a better place out there too.
And just that, I think that peace and knowing that can be really comforting.
Yes.
For sure.
100%.
Because it's so hard to be here without him, but at least, it's just tough, right? Because you really desperately just want him here with you. But at least you can know he's happy. You might not be happy. At least.
Yeah, we miss him, and it's been hard for all of us. It's been really hard for our kids, and having to go through.
Talk about that. Talk about the twins and how they've been doing.
So it's very interesting. Everyone thinks twins are the same, but they couldn't be more different. And their grieving process was very different as well. One was much quieter. His grief came out as anger, and that was really hard. Most of it was directed towards me. I'm his comfort person, and so that's kind of how it came out was anger, just in, tone of voice, things like that were not him. Thankfully, over the last couple months, that has kind of subsided, and he's kind of getting back to his, quote unquote, normal self. Our other twin is much more emotional. We've laughed since he was born. You never question what he's feeling. Happy, sad, crazy, whatever. You don't ever question it. And that's kind of how his grief has been too. So lots of nights of him crying before bed, writing stories, drawing pictures. He talks about it more. So it's been very hard to navigate, our own grief while also dealing with their grief, which is very, very different. The boys, they each could have their own room at our house, but they all chose to sleep in the same room together.
All 3 of them did?
They did. They had bunk beds in there, and they all 3 wanted to be together. It was a fight most nights of who got to sleep with who, because they all 3 wanted to be in the same bed, but that's how close they were. But, for them to go to bed at night and not have that, not have their brother with them was really hard.
Yeah. Well, really hard for all of you, right? Yeah. It's just such a reminder. Yeah.
I feel like every parent that's lost someone kind of feels the same way, but you get up and you don't know what to expect that day. Every day is a challenge, and it's new in different ways. Celebrations have been interesting. I say interesting, that's not the right word, but it's hard. We just celebrated our twins' birthday, and it's like, you want to be happy for them because it's their birthday, but it's also hard to be happy. So it's walking that fine line. The day before their birthday was what we called Aven's homecoming day. It was the day that we brought Aven home from the hospital for the first time. And I was reading back on my memories on social media, and I talked about how happy that day was. The first day we brought him home from the hospital, and how our family was together, and how, nothing could stop us. And then I look to this year, and it's like, wow, that piece is missing, and that's hard.
Yeah, it's so hard. So talk about you and your journey a little bit. And we kind of focused on the family a little bit, but what about you?
What about me? In a good way, I did not know anyone locally that had lost a child. I have friends that have lost parents and siblings, but I did not at the time know anyone that had lost a child. And that was a very lonely place.
Yeah.
Found a support group, and it was wonderful. But again, I was the only person that had lost a child. And there's just a difference, there's a difference, not to say that people who've lost a parent, it's any less, it's just different. There's no other way to explain that.
Yep. I 100% agree.
I've been very thankful over the last couple months that I had made some connections with some other moms, particularly that have lost their children. And it has just kind of opened up a new realm. And they kind of put themselves out there. I mean, they reached out to me and just said, hey, I'm local. I also lost a child. Let's get together. And that has meant the world. And just the connection that you can feel with another mom that's going through it has been pretty amazing to me.
Yeah. It's just such a lonely place to sit when you're sitting in that. And when you can be with someone else, I think other people in some ways might think it's a little bit odd and a little bit strange that you want to do that, to kind of hear those stories and put yourself in that place, because they feel like, well, doesn't that remind you of your own sadness? But it just actually gives you so much hope. I think that if they can do it, so can I.
Yes.
Just feeling that comfort from other people, that you're just not alone.
Well, and what I've found is I want to talk about Aven. I want to talk stories.
Yeah.
I want to share with people, but it makes people uncomfortable, and people don't say, and so oftentimes people don't say anything. And
yeah,
in the beginning, that would upset me. I've run into someone in the grocery store and clearly they knew and they wouldn't acknowledge it. And that was hard. Now I'm kind of at a place where I understand that it's not meant out of they're not being disrespectful. They just don't know what to say.
Yeah. So then they say nothing.
When you're with other parents, you can talk about your kids and it's just normal.
And they want to hear it. I mean, that's the beautiful thing, is you want to be able to talk about your child to someone who actually wants to hear it. Because otherwise you think, do they really even want to know this? And
yeah. And, my husband and I, we have grieved very differently.
Yeah.
And I think that's very typical. I love pictures. Pictures bring me comfort. I have you can see them behind me. I have pictures all over our house because that's memories for me. At Christmas, I had Christmas pictures printed and put up on our mantle of Aven because it brought me closeness. Where with my husband, it's hard for him to look at pictures.
Yeah.
It's too raw. And it's, we had a little baseball card made for the funeral that we passed out to people. And I have it sitting in my dash on my car, and it's his little picture of baseball, and it's there with me. And my husband gets in the car, he has to, put that away. And so it's hard to find that balance of what I need and what he needs and what our kids need. And it's kind of like walking.
Well, especially because you said the kids are grieving so differently too. So now you've got 4 different people grieving the exact same person in 4 very different ways. So to try to balance that out and find the right place to be is really difficult.
It is. It's, and in the beginning, we had a couple of days at home where it was quiet, but we had 2 young kids that had to get back to school and sports. And so I won't say we ever sat at home, and, a lot of people, when they lose someone, they sit at home and they're quiet and they're to themselves. And that wasn't us. We kind of immediately went back out into society and we stayed busy, and that was helpful, but it was hard too. Because we didn't really have that time to take in all that had just happened. It was back to work for my husband and back to school for the kids. There wasn't a lot of healing time in the very beginning, but I think we're doing the best we can.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you find time to get that healing time later, you think? Are you still kind of waiting?
We're still working through it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think it's important to be able to do and to give yourself that time. I know I've talked before about my therapist talking about, you keep that grief up on a shelf and you can put it away for a little bits of time because you have to, right? when you're taking your other boys to sporting events and taking them to school and doing that, you can't always be feeling it all at those moments. That's too much. But when you have the time, then taking it off the shelf, opening up the box, working with your grief, thinking about your grief, dealing with it is important, because it's not going to go away, right? If you stick it on a shelf and just leave it there, it's not going to go away. It's still going to be there. So pulling it out bit by bit, working through it day by day, moment by moment, even 15 minutes here or there can help you, I think, in the long run to be able to work through things. And it's, I was recently talking to Gwen, and she was talking to someone who said that they hated when she used the word heal, or when any of us use the word heal, because it's not something you heal from. And it's true that it's not something you heal from in that it looks perfect, right? I mean, I think about, when you read magical stories and someone is injured gravely and they heal them and now there's no scar, there's nothing, and they look perfect. That will never happen. You are going to be a messy pile of scars at the end. But that doesn't mean that hasn't been healing. It's just not an open wound anymore. It's still a wound. It's still there. It still can bother you, but it's changed. And now it's a wound with a big scar on it, but it's got a scar on it, so it's not the exact same as it was, right? So that's when we talk about healing, and we talk about working through the grief and helping yourself through that. It's just kind of getting to that point.
I think that's a great analogy. It's right. It's, the scab is formed over it,
right,
but you'll always have the scar from it.
You always will. And I love how you even use the scab word now, because the thing is there are going to be days when that scab's going to pull off and the wound's going to be fresh and open and feeling really bad again, almost as like it just happened again. And that will happen, and it happens to all of us. But know that over time still it does change.
It does. And, we see almost every day we see signs of Aven, whether it's he loved frogs, and I can't tell you how many frogs I found in my house now, which is just weird and gross.
You're finding frogs in your house?
He loved frogs, and we live on a little farm. He was constantly holding frogs and putting them in his pockets. And I'll find a frog in my kitchen now. And I've never had frogs in my house before. And I just have to laugh. I'm like, okay, Aven, I know you're with us. I know you're here, buddy.
Yeah.
But just lots of little things that just remind us that he's with us. And, even though that scab will always be there, it will heal, but we'll forever be different.
For sure.
Never be the same person.
And you're not even going to look the same, right? You're not.
No, I'll never be that same person I was on August 12th. We're different, but different doesn't have to be bad, but it's just different.
Yeah. Yeah. You hinted at rainbows a little bit too, that maybe that has changed for you and a little bit of a sign for you. So what was that?
Yes, 100%. Like I said, when, right before they put him into the medically induced coma, he told us rainbow was his favorite color. And I cannot believe how many rainbows we see now. We were just out west skiing, and it was a blizzard. It was skiing like crazy, or snowing like crazy, and couldn't see anything. And we're going down our last slope of the day, and the sun's not out, it's not raining, and all of a sudden there's this big giant rainbow in the sky. And I just have to think, okay, that's you here. And I can't tell you how many people, friends, family, send me pictures of rainbows all the time. I walk through our kitchen now, and I'll see a rainbow on the floor where the sun's coming in. It's just, it's pretty amazing to see little signs of it. And it brings us comfort and hope.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Stephanie's daughter, Kian, is a rainbow gal too. And every time I see rainbows anywhere, I am always clipping a picture and sending it to Stephanie as well. You remind me of my little parent support group team that I started with, because I don't know if you know this, but my friend Megan, who was also in that group, her daughter also died on August 13th. So it was the 2 days before Andy, so obviously a different year, so 2018. But so that day has meant something to me already. So I don't know. That whole week, I know so many people whose anniversary dates of their child's death are within days of Andy's, just that week in August. And not sure how that happened to be. And maybe it didn't just happen to be.
I don't think.
But
No,
probably not. Probably not. I know. I have in that week, I have so many little notations of different people. So, so you have a website too, right? And you created this foundation. So tell us a little bit about that and how people might want to get more information.
Yep. So our website is just amazingaven.org.
I love that.
So Amazing Aven, and that's kind of the book that's coming out. It's going to be The Adventures of Amazing Aven, and it's just kind of run, stood out for us as far as like the superhero theme and everything.
Sure.
But our foundation is Amazing Aven's Quest for Amoeba Awareness. And we really are, it's kind of, threefold. It's getting education out, awareness within the general public. So people know if you're taking your kid to the lake and the water temperatures are, wear nose plugs or don't let your kid go underwater. That's the only way the amoeba can get into your brain is through your nose, not from one person to another. It can't from swallowing it. It's just up your nose. So awareness within the general public, but then also awareness within the medical community, making it so the doctors and nurses know the right questions to ask if a kid comes into the urgent care or the emergency room, and that they know the tests to look for. A second part of our foundation is research, looking for new medications that can help treat and make a difference. And, it's trying to prevent another tragedy like this from happening again. We're excited about it. On our website, we have Aven's story. We have a video that kind of, it shows some clips of him and it goes into a little bit more detail about what happened. It also has some links with some good research information directly from the CDC about signs and symptoms and things like that. And we're excited to have, some events each year where we can get back to the community, but also raise money and just do it all in memory of him.
Yeah. It does help to be able to do something kind of with him, right?
Yes. It helps to do something.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I've really enjoyed hearing about Aven and just his awesome spirit, because I just think he's just such a fun, amazing little Aven. So thank you.
Thank you, Marcy. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. If you found this helpful and would like to support the podcast, please leave a 5-star rating and comment. To help financially, you can text Andy's Mom to the number 53555 or visit the donate page on andysmom.com. Your donations are secure and tax deductible, and we are now able to accept Venmo, PayPal, and Apple Pay. Always Andy's Mom is a registered 501c3 organization and can receive donations through smile.amazon.com, Thrivent Financial, and Benevity, amongst others. Marcy loves hearing from listeners. Please feel free to reach out to her via email at marcy@andysmom.com. Also, be sure to sign up for the email list to receive weekly updates as well as pictures of all of Marcy's guests and their children. Together, let's work to inspire hope, one day at a time.